Hey, Mark, we have a visitor today.
Yeah, welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us. And as you know, you've seen some of our videos from me and Diane, and we welcome you to the channel. And we're pretty, advocates for landlords and the struggles that they're going through today. As Diane mentioned, we owned properties back in the day. I don't own anything now. I got out of it in 16. But it's frustrating to be a landlord in Ontario today.
It is frustrating. In fact, I go a step further and say it's very challenging, not just from a financial and legal perspective, but just emotionally. The mindset and the relationship between housing providers and tenants has devolved significantly since COVID sort of ended, if you will. It's just. I just read an article today which sort of puts a spin on it. The federal government, Sean Fraser, Minister of Housing, whatever they call him, federal cabinet minister, I guess, of housing, basically told Paul Calandra, the Minister of Housing for Ontario, that the $357 million that they were going to give to Ontario for affordable housing is not going to be given to Ontario because the province has refused to, or simply not stepped up and provide the information that the federal government wanted. So the federal government is bypassing the provincial government and sending that money directly to the municipalities who are building affordable housing. So there's a war going on. The province, I know, is at war with the municipalities with respect to housing for development charges in particular, and now there's this, in the media, so the dirty laundry is being aired in national media as a consequence of the controversial housing policies of the Ontario provincial government versus, federal mandate.
Well, even when Ford came up with all these new great ideas, and he's going to make it easier, and he's going to try to help, and he's trying to bypass red tape. Like, I know people that develop in Barrie and that are building in Barrie, and when I read that and saw what he was talking about, I was laughing because the municipalities are still running this show. My guy just took a nap. I think he finally got the permit yesterday after a year and a half.
Right. And what they've done is they just worked the loophole, which essentially said instead of, you've got to approve, I think, within 3 months or something like that. And if you don't, then you lose the funding, or you have to give the money back, the development charges. So what the municipalities are doing now is they have a lengthy pre-approval process instead of an approval process. Yeah. So, you spend a year and a half, as your associate did, in getting pre-approvals, and then he gets approved in 2 months. Yeah. Officially. Right.
Well, so and they kept changing the rule. Like, okay, you can do it like this. And then, oh, no, you can't use brick. First, he was going to use siding, and then they said, no, you have to put brick because the neighborhood is predominantly brick, and it's a crappy neighborhood between you and I anyway.
Right.
Okay, so then he gets everything changed. And then they said, oh, no, then you have to change the foundation and everything if you put it to brick because it's heavier. So now you have to go to stucco. Like, the red tape and the stuff, like.
Yeah, I know it is infuriating when it's one thing to have all the rules. It's quite another to have rules that change
well,
on a whim.
And yes, and the provincial government doesn't have control over this, whether Ford wants to act like he does or not.
Right. So, you guys wrote or covered the petition, I guess, a month ago. Is that the?
Yes. So my client Debbie.
Sorry, go ahead.
I won't say her last name. But my client Debbie, I won't say her last name, is a friend of yours or knows you. She lives in Barrie.
Right. I know Debbie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was funny because she mentioned your petition to me, and one of my clients sent the petition, who we sold his house We did an N12 because the buyer was moving in. The people wouldn't leave. It was actually the mayor of Barrie's assistant. Anyway, they wouldn't leave, stopped paying, waiting for court dates for months, have to keep extending the closing. And he sent me the petition to sign before 2 days before Debbie mentioned it, and I have already signed the petition myself.
Oh, okay, so the word's getting around.
Yes.
How many signatures? How
Hold
many
on.
signatures?
Go
I
ahead.
think we're up to about 39,300, give or take.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's still a lot of people seem to think that there's maybe 50 to 80,000 landlords in Ontario. And that's why the politicians always, bend their ear towards tenants and do whatever the tenants want, because there's 1.5 million of them, 50,000 of us. And I look for years to find out what the, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a catch in my throat. Just bear with me a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's why I got the cup of coffee beside me all the time, just in case.
Yeah. So I've been looking for years to find that number, and nobody could ever tell it to me. And then I came across something from StatsCan where they had done a survey of aggregated data with permission from the CRA. And they asked the CRA the question, how many Canadians collect rental income? And the answer that came back was 1.3 million. Ontario statistically is 38% of Canada's population, so that comes out to about 550,000. The thing that we don't know is what they meant by rental income. They don't break it out when you're reporting it on your T4s and things like that. So it could be a garage being rented out. It could be your attic being rented out. It could be a store downstairs and so on. So I assumed about 80% would be genuinely residential income, as because this is unincorporated individuals. These aren't companies. These are just moms and dads and individuals reporting that income. So at 80%, it comes out to about 500,000. So my number is probably 500,000, 500,000 small landlords in Ontario. Which is a substantial number. And, we got 40,000 signatures. So I think there's opportunity here too. If we found a way to reach out to more of them,
You know what my question is? I have two questions. One question is, you must come against the people who assume that all landlords are rich, because we get comments and we're getting blasted on our channel. And they don't realize a lot of people only have one property. Maybe it's their retirement plan. This isn't a bunch of people with a whole bunch of money. And second of all, the other part is, once you get so many signatures on some kind of petition, does it not have to be addressed by the government?
So the first question, aren't all landlords rich and so on? And the answer is absolutely not. I mean, even a 12-unit property generates a 1-digit percentage return on investment after financing and all the operational expenses, after all the government taxes. Governments take about between 15 and 20% upfront, right, in the form of property taxes. Insurance is double, electricity, all these other things. Statistically, probably about 30 to 35% of the income of a rental property goes to financing. So those are the big banks. Typically, and then the government takes 50% of the corporate tax, right? So whatever your net profit is, they take half of it, because they treat it as passive income, not active income, which is what all other Canadian small businesses enjoy. They get a 13% tax rate, but passive income, such as rental properties, whether we work at full-time or not, we're still paying half of that total tax to the government. So I don't think most people realize that the government takes a substantial chunk of the income that's generated by rental properties. And to your second point, Remind me, please, what it was?
Well, I was told, or I was under the assumption that if you had over 5,000 signatures or a certain amount of
Oh,
signatures,
yeah.
the government had to address that petition.
Not that I'm aware of. The government has put in a process, which they have not changed, that requires any petition, any formal petition, to be presented by an MPP. It cannot be done by an individual. So you have to get the support of at least one MPP, which is a minister of provincial parliament, to present it. And in order to present it to the legislature, it has to be original signatures with the addresses of each individual across the province, and it has to be presented on paper. They don't accept digital submissions, number one. And the federal government does, but the Ontario government does not. So I see that as a means of frustrating due process and the democratic process. They deliberately try to stop people from voicing their opinion about things. I've had reports, firsthand reports from all kinds of petition signers that MPPs have refused to exercise their mandated fiscal responsibility as MPPs to meet with their constituents. That's the whole reason for existing, is to represent the voice of their people in their riding on matters of provincial level interest. And they refused. I've got 6, 7 names of MPPs, and I've got tens of MPPs who don't even respond.
So do you think what the problem is exactly what you just said? There's 1 point something million people that are renting, and there's a way smaller amount of landlords. So they don't want to, excuse my French, piss off the people that are tenants because they're going to lose votes.
I think that may be an underlying symptom of the situation. I think the bigger issue is that they simply do not understand what the issue is. They hear the word eviction or automatic eviction, and they want nothing to do with it because they think that us slimy, scum-sucking bottom dwellers are trying to, get rid of the tenants and, in the middle of a housing crisis. And that's absolutely not true. The underlying issue that the MPPs, politicians, tenant advocates, even the media does not understand is that the government has a responsibility to protect the property of anybody under contract law, administered under common law, and what's referred to as the law of proprietorship, or proprietary law. And what that means is when you are given a piece of property, whether it's a telephone, a car, a house, or a rental property, as soon as the one party breaches that and doesn't meet their commitments, typically they haven't paid the mortgage or they haven't paid their telephone bill or whatever it is, then the government, through its judicial process, is obligated by the law of the land to return that property to its rightful owner. So we call that the repossession of property. And what's happening is that the LTB is not doing that. Whether you've got 25 adjudicators or 200, all they're doing is saying, let's give the tenants as much time as we can, and we'll give them an extension. So they're issuing settlement orders that say, you've got 1 year to repay the money. Of course, many tenants will say, yes, we can repay it, and then don't, and then you have to go back to the tribunal again. So sure, they're increasing the turnover of their LTB applications, but I'll bet that you're still going to see a substantial increase in the number of LTB applications because they're going to be reapplications from all these settlement orders that have failed.
Chris, what I don't understand though is how could they not know what's going on? Like, we've been covering this topics for several months,
right?
And now it's even getting bigger. I watched a CBC video today that was on YouTube 3 days ago. Great, 16 minutes long. I'm sure you've seen it. Like,
I did.
This is getting more attention, so I just don't understand why that this issue is still being carried on and not being addressed at all.
Well,
Like, people are losing their homes, their mental well-being, they're stressed to the max, and no one's doing nothing. Like, I just don't understand that part. I'm blown.
well, yeah, I can only speculate because I'm not an insider and I've not had the opportunity to speak to people who are decision makers or in the know. But I would speculate that there was a mandate handed down, presumably from the office of the premier, or as you know, the cabinet. This is not some individual that's doing this. This is a, you know, it's an orchestrated thing, and I believe that there's a, you know, all the members are aware of the issue. I think they were handed down a mandate, when I say they, the LTB, to keep tenants in the units as long as possible, because the government, do not have the resources, and even the municipalities do not have the resources to deal with the homelessness and the other challenges that come with the shortage of housing. So the way that's manifests itself is that they use every excuse under the sun, the adjudicators, to try and find some way to keep those tenants in there. And it's had a blowback now that has led to this.
Well, the other thing that I don't understand, to me, it seems like totally counterproductive, because what they're doing is getting investors totally out of the game. They're selling the properties. They're not renting anymore. I have a basement at my house that I don't rent because I'm too scared to. So they are getting so many people and investors.
What are you scared about?
I'm scared that I'm going to get somebody bad and I'm never going to get rid of them. And they're living in the house with me.
Okay. So you're not going to get paid rent for a year, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure that they've connected those dots, because there's been very, very little evidence of the shortage of housing, or that the guys are getting out of the game. The big operators have just announced 2 weeks ago that 21,500 units will not be have been put on hold indefinitely in the greater Toronto Hamilton area. I also know that one of the largest REITs in Canada, Starlight, announced that they're selling 8 of their properties, totaling about 2,200 units in Ontario, all in big Ontario cities that are known for their anti-landlord legislation, +2 in British Columbia. So I think they do know, but I don't think they've connected the dots between the actions that they've taken and the consequences of this shrinkage in inventory. It's going to take a year or two for them to realize that everything's blowing up, because all the small guys are getting out. And it's the small guys like you and I that offer the most affordable housing. The big guys will never be able to afford affordable housing. The way they do it is they have 10 units that are below market as an agreement with the government in order to get financing, but then they pass on that shortfall of those 10 units to the other 40 units that pay above market rents. So it's really the market rent paying tenants who are subsidizing the lifestyle and rent, if you want to call it lifestyle, but the rents of the affordable units. Conversely, guys like you and I, we provide the basement units, the attics, the laneway homes, the coach houses, tiny homes, and so on. Those are the affordable units, and those are the ones that are being pulled off the market. And you can't measure that. They have no way of measuring that except after the fact, when the people are gone. And I know that last year in 2023, Ontario lost 6,548, I think, 6,500 rental units net. And this year, they're going to lose even more. We built 94,000 homes and we lost 6,500 rental units still.
Yeah,
This year, we're building 88. I'll just finish my last little
sure.
bit. This year, we're going to only build 88,000 units. And we've already lost, out of that 21,000, they're all condos. Statistically, those condos represent between 30 and 50%. So we'll call it 40% as an average, are rental units. So out of that 21,000, 8,000 will not become rentals.
You
Yeah,
know,
well, and
go ahead.
hold
Go
on,
ahead.
Mark. Yeah, and the other thing is people that are building brand new units, even the coach houses around here, they're charging top rent.
That's right.
It's the older homes. It's
That's
the
right.
older homes with the that are the legal duplexes with the upper lowers that you're getting less rent. All these brand new things, they're getting top price.
Well, and that's because the construction costs are through the roof. We do not have enough people. There are more people left the construction industry in Ontario than joined it right after COVID. And then not just construction, but all the trades. Many people just packed up and said, I'm retiring or I'm done. And they did not leave a legacy. They did not leave apprenticeship. People, they didn't sell their businesses. They just wound them down because there was no, well, whatever the reasons were, but there's a massive shortage of tradespeople talent, right?
Yes.
Resources. Consequently, the people who are available are going to go wherever the builders are who pay the most.
Yep.
Right? So small developers are being wiped out here as well. The other thing that I'd learned is that many of the large developers are buying up the complete production runs of cement companies, steel companies, and glass. So they've bought next year's supply and locked it up for their projects. So, you know, the smaller operators or the ones that were slow on the uptake are out of luck finding the building materials that they got, even if they got approval. They can't build it. They don't have the people and they don't have the supplies. And when they do build it, it's expensive.
Well, that's the thing, it's expensive. Now, what your petition is asking basically is for the 10-day eviction, but that is already in place in BC and working well, I understand.
Yeah, but I learned something even more dramatic. So yes, the legislation exists. It's been worked through. There's still it's a 10-day eviction process, and it still takes 2 months from beginning to end because you've got a backlog with their, sheriff's department equivalent, but also because they've got an adjudicator in the process. In Ontario, we actually had a 5-day eviction process without an adjudicator involvement during the Mike Harris administration for 10 years. You just issued the order, you proved that they hadn't paid the rent. The tenant had 5 days to prove that they had paid the rent, in which case you get a hearing and go through due process. But if it was uncontested, you get the eviction. The problem today is even if we get the eviction, I just found out yesterday that if you do get the eviction order, it still takes 4 months because the sheriff's office is backlogged.
Well, I was saying that to Mark in one of our videos because somebody said, oh, they got an eviction, they can just call the sheriff. And I said, well, I heard the sheriff is backed up forever too. So
yeah, exactly. And that's why the petition actually talks about 2 things. One is we want repossession of the unit. We're not saying eviction because that's a terrible word. It's got negative connotations and so on. We're talking about repossession of the unit to its rightful owner in a timely manner, which is, like I suggested, 10 days and a few days, to do whatever else one has to do administratively. But part 2 of the petition is that we need to empower all of the private bailiffs in Ontario. There are thousands of them. They do evictions for industrial, office, and retail. Why can't they do evictions for residential? Premier Ford actually deliberated on it a couple of years ago, and then nothing further ever came out of it. It just went into the ether. But we have the solution for that as well. and we're not doing it. The provincial government is not doing it.
Well, I think the biggest problem here is that the provincial government isn't recognizing a problem at all. So if I don't recognize a problem, why would I try to fix it?
I'm convinced that they know about the problem. I have no doubt whatsoever that they know about the problem. This is a deliberate, they're deliberately not,
Avoiding?
yeah, they're
Avoiding it?
avoiding. That's it. Thank you. They're avoiding it, and they're hoping that will just go away, and it's just another, temporary crisis. And of course, they got other major issues, going on as well. It's not, it's not this. What's so frustrating is that the solution is not only elegant, simple, and cost effective, because if you do this, you won't need 125 adjudicators. You'll be able to reduce that probably to 50 or 60 like we used to have. Those extra adjudicators are costing us $7 million a year minimum, probably somewhere between 7 and 10 million. And the tenants who do pay the rents are suffering.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is what I told one of the MPPs. It took about 15 minutes before it sort of, the light finally went on. And then he realized instantly, yes, I understand now. And that is that if I am a housing provider and have a rental unit, and I knew that I was going to get my unit back within 30 days, then I'm going to lower my qualification requirements and standards substantially. I'm much more likely to take on tenants that are marginalized or might be riskier than normal, because if they don't pay the rent, I'll know I'll get it back in 30 days. So I'll lose 1 or 2 months rent. That's not the end of the world, and it's worth it to have a tenant quickly rather than leave my unit empty for 3 or 4 months, which is what I'm doing now. I had 169 inquiries for one unit, and it's still vacant because
I actually tell my clients to wait. I say, if we have to leave it empty for 2 or 3 months, whatever, 4 months, until we find somebody really good that you're comfortable with, then we leave it empty.
Yeah, I have a saying. I teach a course for the last 6-7 years about being a landlord, written a couple of books, and I've come up with a few sayings. And one of them is better vacant than a claimant.
Yes.
Right. Easy to remember. And when you're on the fence and you're trying to make a decision, err on the side of caution in this case, because the government is not protecting us, not protecting its own housing inventory. Forget the fact that it belongs to us, their own people, their own community housing services have the same challenges that we have with the LTB.
Well, plus we're the people, or not we, but there's a large group of people that are investors but we are providing housing.
Yeah, that's right.
And apparently we have a housing crisis.
Yeah.
But they're not addressing the people that actually make a difference at all. So I don't understand it.
Well, I don't think they realize that 95% of all the housing that was built in Canada, which would include Ontario, was built by the private sector. Only 5% of it is social housing, and everybody thinks that the government is going to solve that problem. Housing by its nature is a provincial level matter. It's not federal, and it's not municipal. It's provincial. 90% of all legislation comes from the province, and Ontario has the highest subnational debt in the world. Ontario's debt is higher than 166 countries, including Russia.
Jeez.
So if anyone thinks, and when I say anyone, I'm talking about academics and the nonprofit organizations and the charities and everybody else that thinks the government's going to, cough up $1 trillion, because that's what it would cost to build the housing that has been projected to be needed. Ontario needs 1.5 million homes by 2030. We're already 450,000 short, and we're projected to need another, whatever it is, million within the next 7 years.
Well, and I don't know where you live exactly, but I can tell you one thing: in Barrie, there's no land. There's
Right.
like even developers and builders here, they already annexed part of Innisfil to take some of their land. There's nowhere to build. So
Right.
like there's no available land. So when the government's saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I'm thinking, where are you going to put them?
So there are answers. After World War II, all of Europe was literally flattened. It was devastated. It was rubble everywhere. And Germany, France, and England in particular wrote legislation that basically built whole new cities. And we've got the land to build whole new cities. I do not think government should be involved in any kind of housing except specialized housing, for people who have medical conditions and, need assistance in that way. But I don't think they should just be building social housing because people don't have enough money. What they should be doing is spending that money on infrastructure, build the roads, put in the sewers, put in the fire department, the schools, and so on. Create that infrastructure, and I guarantee to you, developers will be lining up around the block to infill all the housing. And that's where the money should be going, in my opinion.
Mark, we got about a minute left here. Do you have a question?
Well, just if we look back even, 8-10 years ago, that LTB process was more efficient. I don't understand why we're still doing a Zoom where it takes so long to get answers back. So much, and a lot of the backroom stuff, in a sense, you would have representatives trying to make deals, trying to make bargains, try to get things on track. Like we go in there and within 2 hours, I'm walking out the door. It's not happening. Like, why would we go back to the way it was?
That would require more than a minute to answer, I'm afraid.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in technology. I just think they've executed it very poorly and didn't think it through, and it's a knee-jerk response. But the technology is the only way to solve the problem. I don't think you can go back to in place. There can be exceptions, but I don't think it can be the norm.
All right.